am Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World and the Black Business School. And as you know, we get an opportunity every Wednesday to talk to Powernomics author, Dr. Claud Anderson. First of all, I want to ask Dr. Anderson, how you doing today, sir?
Oh, I'm holding him, just staying busy as a one-eyed dog in a sausage factory.
That is a very colorful analogy. I'm trying to picture the one-eyed dog, you know, and I wonder why he's in the sausage factory. But you know, that's either a good thing or a bad thing. So, Dr. Anderson, you know, I always love these conversations because you are able to give a perspective that I think that people need to hear from. I mean, people need to hear from those who are more experienced than the rest of us. I'm not going to say our elders, because I'm not going to call you an elder until you want to be one. Because in my mind, you're a strong young man. But you do have some experience, and you do have a lot of knowledge, and you do have a lot of insights that I think people can benefit from. And last week there was a big controversy about not even last week, just a few days ago. The rapper Kanye West. Kanye West, you know, went out on this rant where he was talking about slavery, you know, and he basically he said 400 years of slavery. He said that sounds like a choice to me. And a lot of people had a lot of debate about it. You know, on blackenough.com, which is the platform we have for Black people, it's like Facebook for Black people. There was a lot of back and forth. You know, you had some people that said that he's crazy. How could you say that? How could you say it was a choice? It wasn't a choice. There's no way it was a choice. Then you had those who said, no, he's right. There was a choice. You know, there's a reason why, you know, Black people were selected for slavery. There were other groups that they wanted to enslave that they could not enslave. And I remember you actually wrote about that in Black Labor, White Wealth. And so I said, you know, and I'm so glad you reached out actually and told me you wanted to talk about it, because I wasn't going to bring you in the middle of all of that. But I think your opinion adds value because you're not a 25, 30-year-old running his mouth. You're a guy that's actually been around and has some insightful things to say. So I'm going to be quiet. I'd love to hear your thoughts just on that concept of slavery possibly being a choice and where that might even come from.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. With choice is a behavior pattern that's peculiar to all human beings. Our life is full of choices. We make choices based on our perceptions, what we see, how we feel, what our needs are, what our goals are. Everybody makes choices every day, and even if you start making choices, there are different kind of choices one's forced to make. So I'm not sure what Mr. West was talking about, particularly. I guess he must be talking about, I don't know, maybe mental slavery or something. But all human beings make choices every day. But in my estimation, I try to tell Black folk that you got to understand, even if you start making choices, there's a difference between what I call forced choices and voluntary choices. That is a distinctive characteristic of what kind of choices you're making. For instance, let's go back and talk about slavery as an example. See, if somebody walked into your house one day and you're in the bed sleeping, and they walked up to your bed and they woke you up and they had a gun to your head and said, hey, wake up. I got a gun to your head. I want you to get out of this bed and become my slave and to work for the rest of your life for unpaid wages and be totally within my command for anything I want out of you, or I'll blow your brains out. That is a forced choice. That's a forced choice. That's not a voluntary choice. And in our society, for I got the last 600 years, people have been making forced choices on Blacks and as well as voluntary choices. Starting 600 or 700 years ago, white Europeans started making some voluntary choices. They said, you know what, while we're European continent is suffering, let's try to enrich ourselves and empower ourselves into white princes where we can dominate as a power based on our skin color around the world. And they said, what we could do is if let's go back and make a choice, pick a group. And they said, let's go find a group we feel might be disorganized, unempowered right now, and somehow we can go in and take those people and we can voluntarily inject them into slavery. And that's called a forced choice situation. Now, if I were to wake you up in your house and say, okay, I'm forcing you into a forced choice situation, then you understand you have to make a choice. Do you want to die, or do you want to live as an unpaid labor? But you learn one thing later on, that if somebody subject you to a forced choice situation, the first time you get a chance to get out of it, you said, now that I'm out of it, you try to push back with your own forced choice. You try to push back against the white society, say, I'm gonna put a forced choice on you. And that's the difference between seeing somebody waking you up, putting a gun in your head, so you're gonna work for the rest of your life for me, unpaid labor. But once you get on your feet, you say, now I'm gonna do the same thing to you. I'm gonna put a forced choice back on the white society. That's what I tell black people. You push back. That is a basic principle that we learn in the military. That's called a code of conduct, military code of conduct. You learn to push back. Even if you're captured into a code and you put in a POW camp, you always push back. You push back in every chance. You never participate and cooperate with those who are seeking to exploit you, capture you, and enslave you, misuse and abuse you. Push back. And so when I start talking about pushing back or forced choice and in slavery, black folks should have been pushing back. But the blacks who were brought to America, the native blacks, they were so deculturated and so enslaved and so powerless, disorganized, they couldn't push back very well. So the pushing back should have come from Africa, Dr. Watkins, because Africans, the entire African nation, which made about 26% of the world's population, they are the ones who should have been pushing back for the blacks in America for slavery. But see, unfortunately, they did then what they're currently doing now. They over-focus on fight each other over religious denominations, fight each other over ethnicity, fight each other over tribalism, rather than focusing their time and attention on their own people. That's called vertical integration. And so it's Africans the African continent should have rescued the blacks in America. Had they come together as a group with 26% of the population and one of the most powerful continents on earth, had they, for instance, gotten in their boats and had a naval force, and had that naval force to sail in their boats to America, they could have, I've said a number of times, they could have ended slavery in a month if they wanted to. If those African nations had come over here and in the 1700s to rescue their people, they knew good and well that the white Europeans had come in there through voluntary choice and selected black folk and then began to enslave them around the world. But in 1750, when he hit his peak, black people made up 50% of the United States population. 50% of the population of America was black slaves. That means that even with the few 200,000 Indians running around the country, they could have gotten together in 1750 as a matter of choice and pushed all the Indians, all the whites, Europeans out of the country and pushed them back. If they'd had the African nations over here with them, helping them. But they couldn't do it strictly and solely by themselves. They didn't have the means, the resources, the organizations, and they didn't have the leadership. And so the African nations are the ones that could have done it. But they didn't do it. And so they left the blacks here to be held hostage, after that. So there are two kinds of choices. One is, I say, there's forced choice. You have no choice at all, but you always got choices. And, and if somebody threatens you and put you in a forced situation, you have to make the best choice you can. But so the choices they're talking about now with slavery, with whoever the guy is, West, he's probably talking about he's talking about mental slavery. That's the difference between, I'm talking about physical slavery and mental slavery. Mental slavery is what came up in 1710. That was called Meritorious manumission. You remember in your book you read in Black Labor, White Wealth about meritorious manumission? Now that's when black folk came out of slavery, or they were introduced to what's called the slave codes in 1705 and 1710, and which says that if a black person want to be free in America, he can work his way out of it through meritorious. Meritorious means earn. Meritorious means earn, and manumission means freedom. You could get earned freedom, meritorious manumission, by doing a combination of three things. One, if you would save a white person's life or members of a white person's family, you could get meritorious manumission. What they were trying to do is introduce you to mental slavery, getting you to make a choice for mental slavery. That's the first thing. If you would save a white person's life. Two, if you found some way that you could increase the wealth building of a white slave owner, a plantation owner. That would be the second thing you could do to help earn your freedom. And the third thing was if you would squeal on and tell on anytime a black slave was planning to run away or try to construct a slave revolt or slave insurrection. So if any black person who would do a combination of those three things, he could get meritorious manumission. So you start talking about people like Kanye West, who you're talking, not Kanye West, but Kanye West, whatever his name is.
Okay, Kanye West.
Kanye West. Then he's talking about mental slavery. Somebody's going into meritorious manumission. And see, that meritorious manumission nowadays has been pretty much focused on what we call our black overclass. Our black overclass are primarily people who've been seeking meritorious manumission. But mental slavery is different from physical slavery. I just told you the distinct difference. One's called forced choice, other one's called voluntary choice.
You know, that's real interesting, Dr. Anderson. By the way, I'm speaking to Dr. Claud Anderson, who's the author of the books, Powernomics and Black Labor, White Wealth. And by the way, if you want to, or actually order the books, which I recommend that you have your children read, as well as the Black History Reader, his third book, you can order at least a couple of those books at blacklaborwhitewealth.com. Now, it's funny you talk about that. When you talk about meritorious manumission, this idea that Black people were rewarded for, you mentioned saving white folks or enriching white folks or basically selling out Black folks. And what really got me, you said a lot of things that got my attention. I was sitting there taking notes as you spoke, but I'm gonna focus on one thing at a time. You mentioned in that last piece, you said that the Black, I think you said the Black political class today, that they still implement meritorious manumission. And let me tell you what this makes me think about. And now I'd like for you to expand on that if you don't mind. I got a call yesterday from a woman down in Tennessee who was talking about the Links organization. It was the Links, I guess, is one of the little bougie organizations that they have. And she said, I don't understand that. She said they raised all this money for sickle cell research. And this lady said, so I thought if they're doing sickle cell and it's a Black organization, they're going to give it to like a Black hospital, Black, Meharry's down there. They got Howard University's got doing sickle cell research. They said they gave the money to St. Jude's. And I said, why would they give it to St. Jude's? St. Jude's, they got a lot of Black patients. She said, no, 4% of their patients are Black. I said, well, why would this Black organization, the Links down in Tennessee, give $1 million to St. Jude's? And she said, oh, that's because when they give money, they don't give it because the people are really trying to help people. They give it so that they can be endeared by wealthy white people, that they can be, like they can get invited to certain parties and be part of the elite class and things like that. And so when you mention that meritorious manumission, that second part about, enriching the wealth of the slaveholder, enriching the wealth of the master, and you connected it to the Black political class, basically all these Black folks that do these weird things for white people to get into their inner circles. That's what that made me think about. Can you give some examples of how the political class today implements meritorious manumission, basically doing things that don't make any sense so they can get next to white folks?
Yeah, well, see, let's see. Meritorious manumission is pretty well. Meritorious manumission creates an overclass. That's the whole purpose of it, to create an overclass. What you might call them, whatever groups you want, links, whatever you're talking about. That's the purpose of it. And an overclass primary person responsibility is to come between the Black masses and the white structure to make sure they maintain the Blacks at the level where they're manageable and can take directions and be insulated from whites, to protect them, as I said, for property, life, and everything else. That is meritorious manumission. Meritorious manumission typically was made up of about 6 different elements. One was called Black ministers, Black college professors, Black entertainers, Black athletes, Black civil rights leaders, and Black elected officials. That was a Black overclass, and they get meritorious manumission, but they can't keep that meritorious manumission if they're caught doing something specifically and solely to Black folk. And the meritorious manumission was further carried out by what we called codes of conduct or codes of ethics, etiquette that was implemented after the Civil War. See, I said the code came into effect in the 1705 slave codes. You find that also the Diversity Act was also contained in that. Let me be more specific. The 1705 slave codes put in diversity, would tell Black folk, here's what you got to do as a Black person. Here's how white people must conduct themselves. Then in 1710, that's when meritorious manumission kicked in. And that's why, and I told you about maintaining a monitoring of blacks for slavery, insurrection, and everything else. That's why I looked at about 300 some possible slave revolts between 1710 and 1865. And in almost every instance of 300 some possible slave revolts, a Black person squealed in every one of them, told. I don't care if it was Nat Turner, VC, or Prosner, they squealed every time. In some cases, they squealed three and four different groups squealed to get meritorious manumission. And so when you bring up to present date, they're still getting meritorious manumission. And how do they get it so effective today? Because part of the code, and remember now, this is going back to you talk about choice, that's called voluntary slavery. See, back in the plantations, Dr. Watkins, on the plantations, every Saturday evening, they would set up a special situation for blacks to be able to, and they called it burning off the energy at that time. All the black slaves were called out to come around the white mansion on a Saturday evening after all the cotton and everything being put, animals have been fed. And whites would give them glasses of lemonade and iced tea and give them a chance to burn off their energy. And so blacks would dance, sing. They would have head-butting contests, marble shooting contests, wrestling contests. They could dance, sing, beat on the banjo, play horns. They could have coon hunts, anything they want to do that burned off their energy to keep them pretty well lifeless, keep them relaxed. And so that by Sunday morning, they would be ready to have one day relaxed and they go back to work again. That's called burning off the energy. That created a class. That same class now still exists. Whites pretty much says as long as black folk are entertaining and doing something that does not show a direct connection to the class that they're in as an underclass, then in a black, they can be still chase football, basketballs, baseball, tennis. They can wrestle, they can entertain, they can dance, sing, do anything. They can rap, do anything they want to do. It doesn't make any difference if they do, but don't let them get caught doing something specifically and solely that relates to their position in society. And that's why, as an example, you asked me for an example. They had one black woman, for instance, at the University of Alabama. She had been a cleaning woman, been washing clothes on the college, on the university campus. The white kids for years, all through Jim Crow segregation, would take their clothes to her and she would wash their clothes and iron them for them. And guess what? When she died, that woman had saved something like about $500,000. She had saved all of her money. And guess what? When she died, guess who she left the money to? She left it to the college, to the university, not to black folk. Or you take George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver is supposed to create something like 200 different products, anyway, off of peanuts and sweet potatoes. All these different products, all these recipes and formulas he'd come up with to create products for how you can use it, how you can use peanuts and sweet potatoes. And guess what? All those formulas and recipes, guess who they went to? They went to the white college. They didn't go to the black college. And okay, let me bring it to modern days. I got blacks all right in politics. Every time you ask them right now, they make a lot of money. All that in the members of that overclass. But they don't devote anything and dedicate anything to blacks. I mean, if they want to do something for a black person, they say, well, now how can I do it without violating the Meritorious manumission code? Now that I'm doing well in the society, I'm making a lot of money. I'm playing with football, basketball, baseball, tennis ball, golf balls. I'm singing, dancing, telling jokes, and having a ball. How do I do it? They say, well, I'm gonna help black folk, but they're not gonna go to Chicago or Philadelphia or Pittsburgh or St. Louis. They're gonna go to Africa, create a special school for kids over there. Or if B.B. King is singing and he wants to do something about music, he's not going to teach blacks. He'll have a special school down in Texas training white boys to play the blues. I got other ones they'll set up golfing programs, not for black kids, but teach white kids how to play golf. Or you go to out in California, you got a lot of black, very good, talented black basketball players. They don't set them up for blacks. They set them up for others. This is an old tradition. And so that's why I'm concerned today when you talked about somebody saying, well, what's the difference between Dr. Anderson, what he says about choice and what this guy West is saying about choice? There's a very distinct difference. And see, and I'm very disappointed and sometimes a little irritated if somebody tells me that somehow you got a rapper who's still doing the same thing they were doing during slavery. And somehow I devoted my entire life to fighting for black folk, to elevate them. And someone equate me to that's an insult. And I want every one of your listeners, every one of the pieces in your program, go out and say, hit what's on the website or whatever it is. Go out and say, let me tell you one thing. Dr. Anderson doesn't play that. I devote my entire life to black folk. And I don't know any rappers, of that nature, and I could care less. And so, and my only education is do everything I've done all my life for writing for blacks, put out all my books for black, put out the first affirmative action plan for blacks, put out hundreds of thousands of newsletters, had a black think tank. Homie, don't play that, okay?
All right, everybody. I'm talking to Dr. Claud Anderson, the author of the books Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, and the Black History Reader. If you want to support the work that he's doing at the Harvest Institute, it's amazing work. I hope you go and make a donation at harvestinstitute.org. That's harvestinstitute.org. Also, if you happen to be near Atlanta this weekend, we're doing the Power Investment Conference. You can learn more at powercon.io. That's powercon.io. And somebody's asking, how can you share this video? You can't. It's hard to share it on Instagram, but if you're watching anywhere else, you can share it. Also, we have a lot of activity happening right now at blagenough.com, which is kind of basically, if you're tired of being put in Facebook jail, tired of being censored, tired of them stealing your data, we have a platform that I'm using as my new Facebook called Blagenough, and it's spelled BLAGGENUF. That's BLAGGENUF. Somebody please type it in so others can see it, blagenough.com. All right, so Dr. Anderson, let me ask you this. Now, you made an interesting point earlier. You made a lot of great points, but I want to focus on one thing at a time. You mentioned that there were over 300 slave revolts between 1710 and 1865. 300 slave revolts. You said most of those revolts, if not all of them, were taken down because somebody told the master. Somebody wanted the master to know what was going on. When you mention all these slave revolts, what that almost says to me is that, one argument somebody can make if somebody says that being a slave is a choice, I think that's a harsh way of saying it, but it sounds like you were saying at least that whether you choose to resist is a choice. And it sounds to me like there were a lot of slaves who made the choice to resist. It wasn't like everybody just said, I want to choose slavery this morning. I just want to be a slave for my whole life and die. It sounds like you have thousands and thousands and thousands of slaves that made a choice to fight back. They just couldn't get everybody to make the same choice at the same time. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. And two things, though, that you're absolutely correct. And a part of that 300 number came from the fact that anytime a black person did anything that struck back at white folks, they would classify that as a revolt and an insurrection, though. I mean, there are instances in history where some black people got upset with the master and they poisoned the son of a guns. They poisoned him. But then when white men were arrested, that was a slave revolt. They revolted. Anything that struck back, because you see the code of ethics says that you should never raise your hand, or in the slave codes, that a black person should never raise his hand to a white, should never look down on a white, should take off his hat when he talks to a white, he should step off the sidewalk and talk to a white, he should never look through the same window when the white's looking through it. All these kind of things, all those were negatives, and that was a what they call an uppity black, and or a bad black. And so, as a matter of fact, in 1870, the slave code, when they first started electing blacks after the Civil War, they put out a code of ethics that says, if you get elected to a public office, you come into the public sphere where you get a lot of visibility, 3 things you cannot do, following up on the Meritorious manumission. You cannot come in there and talk about group issues. You must talk strictly about individuals. You cannot look out. 2, you cannot come to the arena and talk about any form of blackness. You can't bring up the issues of black. That's now they call it political correctness and benign neglect. And 3, you can never try to hold white folks accountable for what they've done to you all for over 460 years. Try to hold white folks accountable in terms of affirmative action, reparations, or set-asides, agreements, anything for black folks. That was a part of the code of ethics that came up in 1870. So the first blacks that went into public office, either through an election or an appointment, they've been bound to that. So they're still bound to it. That's why right now, you can't find any blacks they're going to do in the overclass going to do anything for blacks. If they do it, they're going to do it security. They're going to sneak it in, sneak it around. That's why in 1960, as I mentioned this in the black, I think in the black wealth, white wealth. Yeah, I think I mentioned that book. Yeah, black labor, white wealth. I did a study in 1960, Dr. Watkins, where I looked at the social discomfort indicators in the country for black folk, as in terms of welfare, food stamp, public housing, imprisonment, low income, unemployment, all this stuff. And I found out that at that point in time, they had 103, not 1,000, but 103 black elected officials in the entire United States. I did an analysis of the social discomfort indicators at that time, the conditions of blacks at that time in 1960, and it was bad. But I waited for 30 years until 1990. And I did the same exact study. Why did I do it in 1990, 30 years later? Because in 30 years, Dr. Watkins, the number of black elected officials in the United States had gone up from 103 to over 9,000. Now, that's a 9,000% increase. Now, just think for a second. You're an extremely bright mathematician. Just think, if you go from 100 to 9,000, that's a 9,000% increase. And I said, goodness gracious. If we've had a 9,000% increase in blacks in elected offices in the United States, boy, black folk must be doing extremely well in this country, because they should have gotten, because you see in politics it's based on quid pro quo, something for something. And so it means in politics, black folks will be getting benefits based on their representation or their voting patterns. So I said, with that many blacks now holding office, black folks should own half of the United States and half of California or something. And I went and looked at the social discomfort indicators again, Dr. Watson. Guess what? Black folk didn't progress; they went backwards. The wealth and inequalities and differences didn't improve. They got worse. Because you know why? Because there's no direct connection between a black person being elected and holding a public office, whether he's elected or appointed, and black folk getting benefits. And see, the same thing is true with the black overclass. There are no benefits coming down to black folk. That's why the racial inequalities continue to expand and worsen. There is no connection between a black in the black overclass having resources and the black getting elected to public office and getting benefits. And the whole nature of politics, Dr. Watkins, is a simple process that says quid pro quo, something for something. One hand washes the other. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. If I vote for you and put you in office, you owe me. In a nation of representative government, which means a person holding a public office through an appointment or election, he's supposed to represent those people who's in that office. And yet, every time a black person runs for an office, the first thing he's going to tell you is that if he gets elected to office, he's going to represent all the people. He's going to represent everybody. That defeats the purpose of having a representative government. Why would you want to have a nation of representative government? And and black folk gonna represent everybody. Everybody else gonna represent. When did you have elected white officials from Mississippi, Alabama, strong Thurmans coming to Washington? I'm here to represent black folk. They don't care about representing black folk. That's not their problem. And see, but every black, that's why you get no benefits from black elected officials. That's why the black congressional caucus should be called a pink caucus. They ain't gonna do anything with black folk. If I go there and talk about reparations for black folk, which I'm pushing, and so they see me coming, they're running, hide in the bathrooms. They don't want to be held liable for doing anything for black folk. And that's why I got 2 programs coming up this summer, major programs for this nation. 2 of them, I think one will be conducted in maybe July and maybe another close to September, last of August. And a major proportion, things that never happened to black folk. I'm gonna be calling black folk out across this country, and we're gonna do it right. And that's why in some way I'm resentful of the fact somebody would align me with somebody named Kanye West. I have a hard time with that name because it's not phonetically correct. See, is a short vowel sound. It should be and, can, and yay. It can't be ye. It has to be yay. So, and I can't even pronounce the damn correct name because it's not phonetically correct. How do you get con? You sounded How do you get con? That doesn't even make any sense. Neither the name nor anything is making sense to me.
Well, you know, I think that, and by the way, everybody, I'm talking to Dr. Claud Anderson, the author of the books Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, and the Black History Reader. You know, I think that when Kanye West was trying to speak, he was speaking in his way about what he believed. And I think that he felt that, you know, that if you're talking about, you know, that many people, like you said, I think it was in 1750, where black people were 50% of the population. And there was a point where Kanye does say, you know, it was all of y'all. And he said, it sounds like it was a choice to me, right? Which I think was a very harsh way to kind of say it. But it almost sounds like when I'm listening to you carefully, you know, in terms of what you talk about, you mentioned that we had so many people here that if we had all made the same choice, and if all of, I wouldn't even say we, because I wasn't there. I can't say what I would have done. I ain't never had to go through it. So I only have so much liberty to speak. But it does almost sound like, you know, if our people had made that same choice that the people say in Haiti made, or whatever the case may be, it could have had a different outcome. What do you think about that? Do you think that there was even a choice at all? You mentioned the choice to resist. If they made that same choice, if everybody had just decided to do the same thing, and everybody said, okay, everybody on this day, we all gonna go kill Massa, and you know, do you think that could have changed the course of history, or how do you think that would have played out?
Oh, yeah, that would have changed the course of history. But the thing is happening, though, is that see the same thing happened in the military. And I indicated to you before that in the military, we have a code of conduct. But see, when the slaves came, when these blacks, Africans were enslaved in America, became Native Americans, they were stripped of their culture, stripped of their history. More importantly, they were stripped of their social cohesiveness. And and a code. They didn't have a code of conduct. See, in the Marine Corps, we had a code of conduct, for instance, where it says that if I'm ever captured, I'm going to push back. I'm going to fight. I'm always going to take care of my fellow soldiers. I'm going to be responsible for them. I would never cooperate with the enemy. That was a code of conduct in the Marine Corps. And see, in Korea, we had in the Korean War, we had over 7,000 POWs. These American soldiers that were captured and put in prisoner of war camp. But once they went into those war camps, they were in there for 3 years, Dr. Watkins, 3 years, and they were subjected to what we call brainwashing nowadays. But then what brainwashing was nothing but group therapy run backwards. It's a way of management. It's how you manage human beings. That's what brainwashing was, how you manage human beings effectively to keep them under control. And they went to what's called a dog-eat-dog period. And so in that dog-eat-dog period, what those soldiers were forced to understand is that, first of all, you get benefits for cooperating, even if you're captured. And the same thing with those slaves, they were brainwashed to believe that they get benefits once they're captured. Two is they went through a thing where they said, and if you squeal on and tell on anybody in the Marine Corps, in the camps, army camps in Korea, North Korea, and in China, we had 7,000. Now keep in mind that 3,000 out of 7,000 died in captivity. And they died because a lot of things. One thing was for the food shortage, another was cold, but more importantly, they died for what we call give-up-itis, surrender-itis. They gave into the realities of being enslaved or being encamped in these POW camps. But they went through a period, the point I'm going to make with it, went through a period called dog-eat-dog, where they were rewarded, just like in Meritorious manumission, they were rewarded for squealing on their fellow soldiers. And that was so effective, Dr. Watkins. But guess what? When they were brainwashed to squeal on, just like in slavery, Meritorious manumission, their own people, do you know in those camps, out of 7,000 prisoners, that most of those camps didn't even have fences around them, Dr. Watkins. They didn't have fences. But we didn't have not one soldier to escape from camps in North Korea and China during the Korean War. Not one to escape. And the camps didn't even have fences around them. Secondly, they didn't have guards around them, all of them. They didn't have dogs out there chasing you. They didn't have machine guns on the walls watching you. They still couldn't, because mentally they became so imprisoned in their mind, they lacked the will and the willingness to even try to escape. And more importantly, what broke them down was, I told you about Meritorious manumission on blacks, where they got together and communicated and said, I'll squeal on you if you do something. And so the white man rewarded them in Meritorious manumission, but they all, in the camps overseas, they rewarded the prisoners, the United States soldiers. When a soldier squealed on another soldier, guess what he got? He got a piece of candy, he got an apple. Meritorious manumission was imposed on our prisoners in POW camps in North Korea and China during the Korean War. The same identical process that was put on black folk in this country during the 1750s all the way up through the 1960s. They were rewarded for meritorious manumission. And to the present time, they're still being rewarded. So somebody start talking about choice. How you got a choice when you got people that out there squealing against you? You got Sambos turning you in. You go out and you fight for black folk, and all of a sudden you're standing up in front of them fighting your enemy, and all of a sudden a brick hits you in the back of the head. One throws a brick at you. And that's why I'm talking about today. Somebody said, well, Dr. Anderson, they're going to classify you with West, Kanye West, and to discredit you. And so you out there fighting for them with your back to them, and you're facing their enemy. You get hit in the head, the back of a brick, but you got Sambos and across this country. They'll try to they'll pay blacks to bring you down. And that's why people like your audience right now, every one of your audience should be saying, hey, let me tell you one thing. If I see anything on a social network bad about Dr. Anderson, I'm coming after you. I'm going to push back. I'm going to push back just like he taught us about we should have been pushing back in the prisoner of war camps in Korea and China, and why we should be pushing back during slavery. When Anderson talks about choice, the choice is you push back. That's why Frederick Douglass and Malcolm X said, nobody can ride your back if you straighten up. That's what Dr. Anderson says in slave. If a slave, you straighten your back up and make them slide off. You tell those blacks in your listeners, stand up for yourselves, push back. You push back. When people try to do you in, you push back. And when they force you, they use forced choice on you. As soon as you get strong enough, use forced choice back on them. Forced choice means you go back into go out in the community and say, I'm gonna make a forced choice. I'm gonna avoid your music if you're singing and dancing, telling jokes and rapping and clowning on TV. I'm on Tell the Whites. I'm gonna boycott your businesses. I'm not gonna buy your products. I'm not going to ride your buses. I'm going to use forced choice too. I'm going to walk rather than riding your bus. Tell my people, I said, forced choice is different than voluntary choice that maybe Mr. West, Kanye West is talking about. He's talking about some kind of mental form of slavery and about some kind of choice. My choice is physical. That you saw, I said, I'm not gonna buy your product. Dr. Anderson, his principle says, don't support anybody, anything, any organization, or any politician who won't support you. Don't even support some of your overclass. Don't support these members of your overclass that won't support black folk in this country, that won't do anything to put money and wealth and power into these black communities and build businesses for them and help them be a competitive people. That's forced choice, not this voluntary choice that maybe West is talking about.
All right, everybody. Well, you know, I'm talking to Dr. Claud Anderson. He's the author of the books Powernomics, Black Labor and White Wealth, and also the Black History Reader. His website, if you want to make a donation and support his lawsuit on reparations that he's been filing and putting his own money into, go to harvestinstitute.org. That's harvestinstitute.org. If you want to buy one of his books for your children, which I highly recommend, you can actually buy a couple of the books from us if you'd like. Harvest Institute has some of the books as well, but also at blacklaborwhitewealth.com. That's blacklaborwhitewealth.com. You can buy copies of the books. The other thing I want to make sure I mention to you guys is that this weekend we're having the Power Investment Conference. We're going to talk about all the different ways you can invest and how your money can grow. Some of you saw the other day when I broke down and explained how Warren Buffett turned $114 in 1942 into $400,000 in 2018. And I use LeBron James as an example to help you see that. A lot of you were there. If you were there, raise your hand because I know that the analogy really impacted you in terms of helping you see what exponential growth looks like. So if you want to learn more about power investing and how that works, you can actually visit powercon.io. That's powercon.io, and you can come on out to the conference. Dr. Anderson, I want to ask you about this. Can
I make one other point before you ask me that?
Oh, please go ahead.
Let me wrap that point. Let me wrap one point. See, what I want black folk to understand, if you're going to talk about forced choices in the situation being to help elevate black folk, the group you should be going after should be the African nations. See, and we always talk about how we're going to help Africans. When I was taking trade missions in Africa, I used to tell them just the opposite. When they'd be interviewing me for a newspaper article in Nigeria, not in Lagos. I said, let me tell you, he said, well, Dr. Anderson, you blacks in the United States should be doing more to help us. I said, no, it's just the opposite. You blacks in Africa should have been doing more to help black folk in America. That's my point I was making to you earlier. I said, you got all the resources over here in the continent. You haven't been enslaved. You might have been colonized, but you weren't enslaved. You weren't denied a religion. You weren't denied a culture. You weren't denied a language. You weren't denied all of that being in the land had resources you could make, that you could touch, feel, and smell. I said, black folk don't necessarily owe you. You owe black folk. And I said, don't get on my back about that. Well, we know we talked. I said, I'm not Andy Young. I don't take that. You know, you owe us. You should get your acts together. You got 26% of the population in the world. And you sit up here in Africa, the richest continent on earth. And you're up here messing around with black folk, fighting other black folk, Boko Haram, where you're killing other black people, talking about some religious belief and some ethnic or tribalism, talking about what tribe you belong to. I'm in here in Nigeria, you got 200 different languages and 200 different tribes, and you're all fighting each other. I said, that's BS. I don't come to me, tell me about blacks in America owe you. The native blacks in America have been struggling by themselves to come up with a culture and a force and to unite to be able to compete and try to survive slavery. I said, you Africans should have come over there a long time ago and rescued these people and brought some resources over here to help them. But you're not doing it. They're fighting each other. And I know you were colonized in 1866 and broken up and divided. I said, but I've tried to deal with this issue in my new book. In question 26 in the Black History Reader, I tried to address this. The African continent could have been one of the most powerful groups in the earth. You could dominate when you got the resources if you would hook up with blacks in America and try to create a unified force. Unified. That's why you had ECOWAS, the East African continent, colonial powers come together and come into one force in Africa, one united force across Africa, all blacks. Forget the colonization where British owned Mauritania and French owned Mauritania and the British owned South Africa. Forget that crap and deal with your people. Put your race before you put all this religion, ethnicity, and tribalism that they've imposed on you. And somebody talking about that's your choice. Make hard physical choices based on the realities of racism. Stick with your own people first, and under no circumstance allow anybody to classify me with somebody who's rapping and mapping and not doing anything for their people.
Hmm. By the way, I see the brother keeps asking about the Warren Buffett, LeBron James lecture I did yesterday. That's one I actually made available to the public. So you can actually go to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Dr. Boyce Watkins, youtube.com/Dr. Boyce Watkins, if you want to actually watch it again. It's really good. It's really informative. Dr. Anderson, I want to ask you about this. You mentioned that in your book, in Black Labor, White Wealth, I believe it was, I remember reading a section of your book where you talked about, about the fact that they didn't actually have to just pick Africans as slaves. That white folks, that they could have maybe enslaved Native Americans, maybe they could have enslaved other whites, maybe they could have enslaved Asians, but they really just kind of picked the Africans, and that they picked people that look like us as slaves. And that I thought was really interesting, and I think it even links a little bit to this whole debate over how much choice the slaves, might have had. Can you talk about why we were selected for slavery in the first place when there were so many other groups of people that could have been enslaved?
Well, yeah, I wrote that book about 26 years ago, but they call it Black Labor, White Wealth. But one of the primary reasons they chose you is because, as I said to you before, because Europe was in desperate straits when they decided to start enslaving black folk. That was in the late 1480s and 1490s, because at that time Europe was being suppressed by crime, diseases, famine, everything else. The European continent was, Dr. Boyce, was going down the toilet. They had to find some way to resurrect themselves, and they wanted to find a way to enrich themselves. As I said, and when Pope Innocent put out a public edict in 1488, says you're going to enslave somebody, change the formula on what you're going to, the basis for enslaving people. And contrary to what you hear today about the Hannitys and the O'Reillys and all this Fox Channel people about, we've always had slavery. No, you did not. You had a specific kind of slavery until you started enslaving black folk. That's when that's when you started making a choice. You start making a choice in the late 1890s and early 1500s. Because prior to that time in history, you had slaves, but the slaves were based on three factors. One is that if you had personal indebtedness to somebody. Two, if you were for religious persecution. Or three, if you were the prisoner of war. I just told you about Korea and in China and during the Korean War. Those were the things where you were enslaving people. Don't let people keep BSing you about, we always had slaves. There's nothing special about blacks having slaves, being slaves, and that was a choice. No, it wasn't. Up to that point in time, it was based on those three factors until Pope Innocent in 1488 says, do this. This time we found out that we've had some slaves that were given to us back in 1445 by Henry the Navigator. We had 16 slaves. We used them in the Vatican. We used slaves and their offsprings in the Vatican, in the Catholic Church, to be waiters and servants for us. And by 1488, he put out a public edict says, if you're going to have slaves, do not waste your time messing around with Indians or anybody else. Go for the blacks. They are the best ones you can get. They're hardworking. You can use them, and they'll make an ideal slave. And that way you can always identify them based on this thing, that their skin color is always just the opposite where you are. They are a badge. Their skin color is a badge for recognizing. They're also not only, it's a target. So go for them. That was in 1488. And so by the 1500s, that's when they started to doing the massive enslavement around the world. And at that point in time, they said, the white person said, look in the mirror and pick those who are just the opposite of you. If you look at yourself, you should always have self-pride. If you have white skin color, white signifies something different from the people you're getting ready to enslave. Your white skin signifies purity, value, virginities, cleanness, and godliness. But now you pick the opposite of that. What would be the opposite of that? Well, that'd be the opposite is blackness. Okay, then blackness would signify odious, meanness, dirtiness, filth, Satan, devilishness. And so you became, that's why one reason they picked you. And secondly, is that you go in there and you use a doctrine called doctrine of unequal exchange. You go in there and you take these people, go there and take some beads and bubbles and a few little small trinkets and give it to them. They love red cloth. They love loud clothing, yellow, red, blue. Go take cloth and go in and give them small things, trinkets, and then for their slaves. And then finally analysis, they finally wound up paying you about $25 for a slave. And they set up this whole thing called profits, and that's a return on your investment. And so you buy a slave for $25, and and you sell them in the United States around there for about $350. And that started that whole concept of capitalism. So those are the primary reasons. And they hate you up until the date because it was so successful, they now hate blacks because white folk made you exactly what you are in this country. Black folk had never been any more nor any less than what whites wanted them to be, Dr. Watkins. And now they look at you and you're weak and spineless. They say you're compromising, you're acquiescing. We had laws that required you in Meritorious manumission that you be all these bad things, that you be weak, that you be powerless, that you always condescend, that you be childlike, that you have no self-interest, and you do all these things. And we made you into that, and during slavery. And now in 2020 or 2018, you are what we made you, but we hate you because one, we are scared of you, because we think you're going to seek revenge against us if you get free and get some weapons. So, but we still hate you because we despise you because you let us do those things to you. That's why they hate you. They hate you because you're exactly what they wanted you to be.
Wow. Oof, that's intense. Well, you know, Dr. Anderson, I want to ask you one last question before I let you get back to your day and everything. You know, when you talk about this, and I agree with you, you know, when you're talking about black folks just being spineless and not being half of what we could be, easily distracted, still caught up in the entertainment, still liking the shiny trinkets, we'll give away our life savings for that kind of bullshit. You know, you mentioned earlier, you talked about a code of conduct. And I like the fact that you link that to your military experience, and I'm gonna go ahead and let everybody know that you know, that I can clearly see based on what you said, and when I connected to slavery, that slavery can be a choice. Being captured can be a choice, not being captured itself, but you can make a choice as to whether or not you decide to resist. And that's what you were saying earlier, and you linked it to the code of conduct. And you said once the code of conduct was gone, then the soldier is no longer a soldier anymore. The group is no longer a group. Unity no longer exists. You no longer can make forward progress, almost like a football team where half the players go that way and the other half go that way. You no longer have a team. You can't win because you're not making the same choice. Right.
That's right.
Right. So you know, I'm going to tell you what I saw today, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this. I thought about code of conduct today because I'm in New York. And I was walking through, I was on the Upper East Side, and my friend said, she said, yeah, this is where the rich folks live. I said, yeah. I said, this area, for some reason, it felt very Jewish. I don't know why. I don't know why. I said, I feel like this one. She said, oh yeah, this is a very Jewish neighborhood. You know, Hasidic Jews especially, they have communities that are locked down, closed off. They have a lot of power because they control a lot of real estate. And I told her, I said, you know, I teach my students about a lot of what the Jews do, not so they can get mad at the Jews. I said, don't get mad at the Jews because they protect their power. Learn from that. You learn from that. You respect that. You know, and she said, yeah, but because they own a lot of real estate and it's very hard to get in. They don't let you in like they'll let you into a black neighborhood. So it sounds like they have gained and protected a lot of their power by having a code of conduct and not letting anybody knock them off their horse. Can you kind of speak to that, just based on what I just described to you?
Yeah, well, see, every group has a code of conduct based on their culture. And since we were deculturized, stripped of a culture, we've never had a code of conduct. Everybody is team-based, group-based. And see, and Asians function as a team based around their culture, their language, and their religion. They function as a team. Jews function around their religion and their white skin and their culture. They function as a team. Indians, American Indians, they function as a team based on their culture and their heritage. And Hispanics function as a culture based on their white skin and their language and their culture. We are the only people been deculturalized. We function on individualism, and whites. That's what whites want, because whites know to be a powerful group that wealth and power comes from the numbers, from the group. Wealth and power comes from the number of the group. If it keep you function as individuals competing against each other, then tell you to go into horizontal issues. Be against those blacks because you're a Catholic and he's a Muslim, or he's a Mormon. No. You stay strict with your group. You come together around your greatest prominent characteristic, which is your race, and don't get caught in these horizontal issues. I would let nobody introduce me and say, hey, I'm going to base my code of behavior, my choice first on my religion or on my political party registration or on my gender, whether I'm a female or bisexual or trisexual. You stay away from those kind of things. And see, that's why you can't come together as a team. You can't have a code of conduct. And that's why in my books, I tell Black folk that you must come together and start playing as a team based on your coming together and pooling your resources, pooling your body, pooling your vote, and then building a community, then going vertical. Don't do anything if in a race-based society is horizontal. Horizontal is in conflict with you. If I build a ditch and ran all the way around the world, and I put every block in that ditch and let them walk, they walk around and around the world and never get out of the ditch. Racism is a horizontal issue. You got don't worry about walking around horizontally, go straight up and vertical. Stay out of horizontal issues. And that's why when I'm doing those tours, I kept telling Black folk, you're not playing, you're not winning. You're not playing as a team. And that's why right now today I'm talking, there was a discussion talking about this thing with this guy Kanye West, whatever. I don't know what, not Kanye West.
You're right, Kanye West. Kanye, the rapper.
I can't say. I keep on. You get this con. I don't know how to get con out of it. So I guess I was an overeducation for too long. I have a hard time with that. I used to teach kids phonetics, and I can't figure out how to say that way.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna tell you what. Kanye West. I agree. I think a lot of people should have gave him a hard time about what he said, or at least challenged him. But I will say, I know his mama was from Chicago and she was a college professor, and so he comes from an intelligent background. I don't know what's going on exactly with him now, but I'd be willing to bet you that Kanye respects you. You know what I mean? I bet you Kanye knows about your work, and I think that we should have room in the Black community. And, this is what we talk about on our social media platform, blagenough.com. I told everybody there, I said, look, I'm not going to tell anybody how to be Black, but I just need you to be Black. And to me, being Black means what you said, that you can't let anything trump your Blackness. You can't let, if you LGBT, that's fine. That just identify with that after you remember that you're Black. If you are into feminism, that's fine. But just remember that comes after being Black. If you are capitalist, that's fine. Just remember that's after being Black. If you are a Muslim, that's fine. Just remember that's after being Black. And I think if you do that and you say we're Black first, everything else is secondary, then you can still have all these secondary identities if you want to, but you don't let that trump the main identity. So for example, I am a member of the Watkins family no matter what. My mama goes to church. I don't go to church. My sister's a doctor. I'm not a doctor. My brother went to Cornell. I didn't. And those are all identities that we all accept. But none of those identities trumps the fact that we're all in the same family. And I think that it sounds to me like that's what you're saying, that you can still be all these things. Just be Black before you all, like I can't go to my brother and say, well, because you went to Cornell, I'm no longer your brother. Or my sister, because you became a doctor and I don't like physicians, I can't be your sibling anymore. Then the family breaks apart and everybody loses. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That is exactly what I'm saying. And see, that's why I created this whole concept called powernomics. Power means you can't do anything unless you got the ability to move inanimate objects, human beings, or anything. It needs power to do it. And economics came from the root as a Greek word. I took the word economics, cut off the echo, and just stuck the nomics and pushed up against the power. We got powernomics. That is your code of conduct, which says I will support nothing, nobody, no organization ahead of supporting myself and my people, period. And that's what powernomics, that's a code of ethics for Black folk. And if you practice code of ethics, then say my Blackness is not only my skin color. I want Blacks to get that in the head. Under powernomics, please remember that color, your skin color is your Blackness, not just skin color. Your Blackness is your badge. It's your honor. It's your historical experiences. And most importantly, it's your exceptionality. It's what makes you a special people. What makes you the most unique people in this nation is your experiences and your Blackness. Nobody in this country is like you. Nobody with yellow skin color, brown skin color, red skin color, white. Nobody's like you. The only people have been treated in an exceptional manner. That's why your exceptionality is what Dr. Anderson keeps saying to you. Stress your exceptionality by calling and memorize it into everybody's mind by saying that we call ourselves native Blacks, which means we are peculiar. We're those people that were stripped of everything, and we've rebuilt ourselves to be special people, and therefore our Blackness means an indebtedness from the white society. They owe us. They owe us in terms of reparation, affirmative action. Well, affirmative action has been so destroyed. Stay away from affirmative action now. I wrote the plan back in 1970 for the state of Florida, went all over the country. Stay away from affirmative action. Go for reparations, and I'll be dealing with that in the future. And lastly, again, I want all the members of your group, if you hear anybody say something about me out there, I want you to do boo-boo on your shoes. You know, I want you to start kicking buttons and say, no, do not mess with Anderson, because if Anderson hear anything negative, I would quit tomorrow. I don't have to represent anybody. And I devote my entire life of fighting for black folk in this country, in the Caribbean, Latin America, taking trade missions around the world with governors and presidents. I don't have to fight for black folk. I fight for black folk because that is a voluntary choice. It's not a forced choice with me. I do it voluntarily, and that's different from force. I do it because I love black folk. And white folk made me a choice way back in 1970. Said, Dr. Anderson, because of the positions you've had in this country, nobody else has had as a black person, all you can get everything you want. This was the Meritorious manumission offers they made to me. They said, you get anything you want if you do one thing. That's what's that? They say, if you play your cards right. And Dr. Watkins, I said, what do you mean play my cards right? They said, all you got to do is stay away from the racial issues. Stay away from race. And I said, Jesus Christ. I rushed home, told my wife, I said, baby, we got it made. I have been offered Meritorious manumission. And all I got to do is play my card right. I got it made. And I said, I'm going to go. And I walked around. I say this all the time. She said, I'm telling a lie when I say it. I walked around with my hand over my mouth like this. I thought I did it for a couple of months. She said, you only lasted 1 week. And said, you started running your mouth again because the governor of Florida had installed a watch line. Now, they don't have watch line anymore. Now they got cell phone. A watch line in my house that every call in the country dealing with black folk, anything that was radical, what was injurious to black folk, the security, the Department of Security sent it to my house. And see, even when I was messing around and assistant to the Police Commissioner of Detroit, I was a research investigator for the Safe Street and Crime Act. And I was working the street and walk the streets ride the streets anymore with the Vice Squad, morale squad, trying to figure out, predicting there's going to be riots in Detroit for the 1967 riots. And they blew up the damn office out on the Michigan State campus. I had all these contacts and everything at that time. I don't care what it was about. I had the contacts. And I was out in the streets riding, trying to protect black folk. So I don't want anybody to try to mess with my reputation. And when I turned down Meritorious manumission and went out on the streets and rode around and wrote a special report as a research investigator for the Safe Street and Crime Act to help black folk. Do not put me in any category. That's why right now people call us Dr. Anderson. Oh, Trump's going to have a race, some kind of race study group coming to focus on racism, and they say invited Jim Brown and Ken West and blah 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 blah. Why don't they include you? This because they know they're not going to include me. Because see, I don't place anything over blackness. And they know that, so they'll never invite me to Trump's meeting in the White House. They may not invite me to maybe most of your mainstream TV or mainstream radio. They're not gonna do that because they know exactly what I'm gonna talk about. I'm not gonna put anything before my commitment to my people, and I expect my people to make sure that when my back is turned, don't let any sucker try to throw a brick at me when my back is turned. And I hold them to that promise and that commitment that they made years ago. I turned down my Meritorious manumission. I want them to turn down theirs.
Well, y'all heard the marching orders. You know, seriously, I really do think when you see these debates happen, you see these conversations happen, if something's just not true, correct the person who says it. You know, I think we could be respectful, but yet be firm and be clear and stand up for what you believe in. I think that's really important. And one thing I'll say to you, Dr. Anderson, I don't know if I mentioned this to you or not, but the first time you and I met was in 2008, I believe. And I remember that you were the first person. I said something. It was in Louisville, Kentucky, at the Black Family Conference, and I said something to you about the issue that I was having at Syracuse University, and I guess I was violating the terms of my Meritorious manumission because I was putting black folks first, and next thing you know, I was going through all this hell. And I remember saying, I said, yeah, every time you do something for black people, they want to label you as radical, and you said that is a compliment. You told me, you were the first person I ever heard who told me that it was a compliment, that it is a good thing to be a radical black man. And you said being radical means that you're doing it different, that you're doing something that means something, you're doing something relevant. And that was after that, I carried my radicalness proudly. And I said, I want to be radical. I don't want to be, I don't want to fit in a world that is this crazy. You know what I mean? I don't want to be mainstream in a world where everybody's going in the wrong direction. I don't want to be liked in a world where everybody hates blackness. So I think that what you say is, I think it gives a lot of courage to a lot of people. And I'm gonna tell you this, I know for a fact that a lot of the men who I bump into on the street that follow everything we're doing, that listen to this conversation right now, a lot of these men are soldiers like yourself. And I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of the men who gravitate toward this empowerment model tend to be the men who served in the armed forces, because, and the women as well. Thank you to the ladies as well for your service. But it seems like those are the individuals that understand that you do have a choice to fight back. You can fight in a lot of ways, but you ain't got to sit there and just get kicked around. You can actually stand up and fight for yourself and defend yourself.
You're right. So that's your choice. Your choice is to be, again, in this case, you can voluntarily say, hey, I'm going to be radical. See, radical is just the opposite of what, you know what the opposite of radical is? Superficial. You got a choice. I did not want Dr. Watkins to be superficial. I'd rather for you to be radical in based on my anointment and my pushing you into that. I'd rather for you to be. And see, because I'd rather you be radical than the superficial. Secondly, when people say, well, Dr. Watkins, you sound angry. And I tell people up front, Dr. Anderson, are you angry? I say, hell, any black man nowadays who's not angry is emotionally disturbed. If you're not angry as a black man, you're emotionally disturbed. That's how simple it is. Anybody who's been enslaved, Jim Crow segregated, been neglected, and politically corrected for 500 years, and he says, it doesn't bother me. I'm okay. I'm fine, just like it is. Then you got your meritorious manumission. And that's the difference between voluntary choice and forced choice. And I tell them, when black folk have been forced into a situation, you begin to get prepared to push back and get people off your backs. And that's what and so anything you read in my books, again, go to go to the Black Reader, section 26, and read why I thought the Africans had a greater responsibility to go and save these enslaved blacks in America. Now I call them native blacks. And when you use the term, don't call them African American, call them native blacks. And I love you for it. And I guess I know your program is going to end now. And I look forward to hearing from you now. And thank you for inviting me to be on your program. But I'm right now I'm a little bit upset when somebody called, 2 or 3 people tell me that somebody's that why am I not meeting with Trump and meeting with him with all these people, meeting with Jim Brown and all these guys meeting with Trump. I said, they don't want me there because I'm going to talk about black folk. And then when somebody said, well, you sound like, there's no way on earth that Kanye West could sound like Claud Anderson.
Well, and the funny thing is, I don't think Obama would have wanted you in the White House either, because we ain't really had anybody that can put black people first that really feel comfortable doing that. So I'm glad you're doing that. And I want to say thank you for your great work and everything. And thank you for your time. It's always appreciated.
Well, thank you. And you take care, buddy. And okay, and I'll be talking with you, and I'll be looking to hear from your listeners too, okay?
All right, my friend. Take care of yourself.
You too.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye now.
All right, so everybody, that was Dr. Claud Anderson. He's the author of the books Black Labor, White Wealth, Powernomics, and the Black History Reader. If you want to order a copy of the book, you can go to blacklaborwhitewealth.com. That's blacklaborwhitewealth.com. Also, don't forget, this week we're doing the Power Investment Conference in Atlanta this weekend. You can actually go to powercon.io. That's powercon.io if you want to learn how to invest. And last but not least, if you haven't tried out, if you're tired of being put in Facebook jail, if you're tired of being censored left and right, if you're tired of people stealing your data and all this other crazy stuff Facebook's doing, we finally got that platform up for you if you want to try it out. And it's thriving. People love it. Thousands of people are joining, on a regular basis. It's called blaggenuff.com. That's BLAGGENUF.com, BLAGGENUF.com. It's a word we invented because we wanted that word to be our word. So feel free to go to blaggenuff.com. So if you are Blag Enough, then come on and join us. We're having a lot of fun. The conversations are very stimulating and interesting, and people promoting their businesses, talking about their families, putting up pictures of whatever the stuff they do on Facebook. The difference is with us, you won't get censored. Just as long as you're respectful and don't do anything that's illegal or anything crazy, then you're welcome to be on Blag Enough. So feel free to join us at blaggenuff.com, BLAGGENUF. I'll see you guys soon. Have a great day. I love you. Peace.